The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of New Haven as Jake Morrison finished his daily security briefing. The settlement stretched out before him like a metal and concrete flower blooming on the surface of Kepler 442b. 15,000 people called this place home, most of them families who had come here seeking a better life among the stars. Children played in the central plaza, while their parents worked the mines or tended the hydroponic farms that fed the colony. Jake had been the Colonial Defense Force commander for 3 years now. He knew every street, every building, every face in the crowd. His small force of 200 soldiers kept the peace and protected the colonists from the occasional pirate raid or equipment malfunction. It was quiet work, the kind that let a man sleep well at night knowing he had done his job. The first sign of trouble came from the orbital sensors. Lieutenant Bobby Chen burst into the command center with sweat on his forehead and panic in his eyes. The screen showed contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Big ships moving fast, heading straight for New Haven with purpose that made Jake's stomach tighten. Lisa Rodriguez appeared at his shoulder, her security badge gleaming in the artificial light. She had been head of colony security since before Jake arrived, and her instincts had kept them safe more times than he could count. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. This was not a drill or a false alarm. This was the real thing. The alien fleet consisted of 12 warships, each one larger than anything in the colonial defense arsenal. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with exotic metals that reflected the system's pale star. As they drew closer, the sensors revealed details that made Jake's blood run cold. These were not explorers or traders. These were ships built for war. The communication array crackled to life with an alien voice speaking in perfect English. The translator software identified the speaker as Nexari, one of the reptilian species that dominated the mercenary trade in this sector of the galaxy. The message was simple and direct. New Haven would surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. Resistance would result in the elimination of all human life on the planet. Jake looked around the command center at his officers. They were good people, trained soldiers who had signed up to protect civilians and maintain order. But they were not equipped to fight a full-scale alien invasion. His heaviest weapons were plasma cannons designed to stop smugglers and raiders, not military-grade warships with energy shields and particle beam arrays. Lisa was already at the communication console, her fingers flying over the controls as she prepared to send a distress signal to Earth. The nearest military base was 3 weeks away by the fastest ship in the fleet. Even if they launched a rescue mission immediately, it would arrive far too late to help the people of New Haven. The alien ships entered the atmosphere like falling stars, their engines leaving trails of superheated gas across the morning sky. The colonists stopped their daily routines to stare upward, confusion and fear spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Parents gathered their children close while others ran for the safety of the nearest buildings. Jake activated the colony-wide alert system, his voice echoing from speakers throughout New Haven. All civilians were to report to designated shelters immediately. All defense personnel were to report to their assigned positions. He tried to keep his voice calm and steady, but everyone could hear the tension underneath his words. The first landing craft touched down in the industrial sector, their hulls steaming from atmospheric entry. The ramps dropped with mechanical precision, and the aliens poured out like a flood of death and destruction. Jake watched through the security cameras as 3 different species emerged from the ships, each one more terrifying than the last. The Zephyrians came first, tall and skeletal with 4 arms that moved independently of each other. Their weapons were elegant pieces of engineering that fired coherent energy beams with deadly accuracy. They spread out in perfect formation, taking up positions with the cold efficiency of professional killers. Behind them came the Grimlock warriors, massive creatures that looked like armored bears walking upright. Their natural hide was thick enough to stop small arms fire, and the weapons they carried could punch through the hull of a starship. They moved with surprising grace for their size, covering ground with long strides that ate up distance. The Nexari commanders stayed near their ships, their reptilian eyes scanning the colony with calculating intelligence. These were the brains of the operation, the tactical minds that would coordinate the attack with ruthless precision. Jake had read intelligence reports about Nexari military doctrine. They did not believe in taking unnecessary risks or leaving anything to chance. Lisa finished encoding the distress signal and looked at Jake with grim determination. The message would reach Earth in 18 hours, but by then it might be too late for anything except revenge. She keyed in the final transmission sequence and sent their desperate plea racing through hyperspace toward home. The first exchange of fire came when a patrol of colonial defense troops encountered an alien scouting party near the main water treatment plant. The human weapons seemed pitiful compared to the alien technology, but the soldiers fought with courage born of desperation. They held their position for almost 10 minutes before being overwhelmed by superior firepower. Jake coordinated the defense from the command bunker, moving his limited forces to slow the alien advance as much as possible. His men and women fought like heroes, trading their lives for precious minutes that might allow more civilians to reach safety. But it was like trying to stop an avalanche with their bare hands. The aliens moved through the colony with methodical precision, securing key infrastructure and herding civilians into containment areas. They did not kill indiscriminately, but neither did they show mercy to anyone who resisted. Jake watched helplessly as his people were rounded up like cattle, their faces showing the same fear and confusion that he felt in his own heart. Commander Zeph High established his headquarters in the colony administration building, the reptilian officer reviewing tactical reports with satisfaction. The human resistance had been stronger than expected, but ultimately futile. His forces controlled all strategic locations, and the civilian population was secured for transport to the slave markets of the outer colonies. What made this operation particularly valuable was the discovery of quantum crystal deposits, far richer than their intelligence had suggested. These rare minerals were worth more than the gross domestic product of most civilized worlds. The crystals would fund his mercenary company for years to come, while the human slaves would provide additional profit. The last organized resistance ended when Jake's command bunker was overrun by Grimlock assault troops. He fought to the end with a plasma rifle in his hands, but courage could not overcome the simple mathematics of superior numbers and firepower. As consciousness faded, his final thought was a prayer that somehow, somewhere, help would come for the people of New Haven. 3 days after the attack on New Haven, Admiral Henry Clark stood in the war room at Terra Command, staring at the holographic display that showed the distant star system, where 15,000 human lives hung in the balance. The distress signal had arrived 18 hours ago, carrying with it the desperate final transmission from Security Chief Lisa Rodriguez before the communication arrays went dark. Clark had spent 40 years in the military, fighting pirates and alien raiders across the frontier. He had seen colonies burned and civilians enslaved, but this felt different. The intelligence reports suggested that this was not a random raid, but a carefully planned operation by professional mercenaries with advanced equipment and military training. The nearest fleet units were 3 weeks away, too far to mount a conventional rescue operation. By the time they arrived, the aliens would have stripped the colony of anything valuable and transported the survivors to slave markets in sectors where human law held no power. Clark needed a different solution, something fast and deadly that could strike before the enemy knew what hit them. He activated a classified communication channel that had not been used since the Centauri border conflict. The call went out to a secure facility on the dark side of Luna, where the most dangerous soldiers in human space trained for missions that officially did not exist. Ghost Company answered on the first ring. Major Ryan Carter received the briefing in a windowless room deep beneath the lunar surface. The holographic display showed everything they knew about the situation on New Haven, from the layout of the colony to the estimated strength of the alien forces. 24 operators sat in silence as they absorbed the tactical data, their faces showing no emotion as they processed the challenge before them. Carter had handpicked every member of Ghost Company from the elite units of Earth's military forces. Former Navy SEALs sat next to ex-Delta Force operators, while veterans of the British SAS shared space with Russian Spetsnaz specialists. They represented the absolute pinnacle of human military capability, soldiers who had been tested in combat and found to be unbreakable. Sergeant Kelly Brooks studied the alien defensive positions with the professional interest of a demolitions expert who had spent 15 years finding ways to blow things up. The energy barriers looked impressive, but every defense had weaknesses if you knew where to look. Her job was to find those weaknesses and exploit them with extreme prejudice. Lieutenant Chris Morgan was already analyzing the intercepted alien communications. looking for patterns in their encryption protocols that he could exploit. The aliens used quantum-based security systems that were theoretically unbreakable, but Morgan had broken theoretically unbreakable codes before. Human hackers approached cybersecurity like jazz musicians, improvising solutions that followed no logical pattern. The mission briefing lasted 2 hours, covering everything from insertion methods to extraction protocols. The aliens had classified humans as a moderate threat species based on their recent entry into galactic civilization. They had no idea that Earth's designation as a death world had produced soldiers who viewed impossible odds as merely another day at the office. The USS Raptor launched from Luna Base 6 hours after the briefing, its experimental stealth systems rendering it invisible to all known sensor technologies. The ship was black as space itself, designed by engineers who understood that sometimes the best weapon was the enemy's inability to see you coming. 24 operators settled in for the 3-day journey to Kepler 442b, each one mentally preparing for the fight ahead. Corporal Alex Turner checked his equipment for the 10th time, running through the gear list that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. His rail rifle was loaded with armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate alien battlesuits, while his sidearm carried explosive shells that could take down a Grimlock warrior with a single well-placed shot. Private First Class Nicole Davis reviewed the mission parameters on her personal tablet, memorizing the layout of New Haven until she could navigate its streets blindfolded. She had grown up on a frontier colony much like this one, and the thought of civilians being herded into slave ships filled her with cold fury that would serve her well in the hours ahead. The Raptor crossed into the Kepler 442 system using the magnetic field of the outer planets to mask its approach. The alien fleet had taken up orbit around New Haven, their ships positioned to provide maximum coverage of the colony, while protecting the valuable cargo vessels that would transport the quantum crystals back to alien space. Commander HFY reviewed the progress reports from his ground forces with satisfaction. The human resistance had been eliminated with minimal casualties, and the crystal extraction was proceeding ahead of schedule. The civilian population was secured in holding facilities, awaiting transport to buyers who paid premium prices for Deathworld slaves. The Nexari commander had studied human military capabilities before planning this operation. Humans were tough and determined fighters, but they lacked the advanced technology and tactical sophistication of the major galactic powers. Their weapons were primitive projectile systems that could barely scratch modern armor plating. What HFY did not know was that his communication systems had been compromised by Lieutenant Morgan, who had spent the last 6 hours learning everything there was to know about Nexari encryption protocols. The aliens followed logical mathematical progressions that made perfect sense to reptilian minds, but human chaos theory approached problems from angles that no alien could predict. The insertion began during New Haven's longest night, when the planet's rotation placed the colony in shadow for 8 consecutive hours. 6 drop pods launched from the Raptor at high altitude, their adaptive camouflage making them invisible to both visual and electronic detection systems. Each pod carried 2 operators and enough equipment to wage war against superior numbers. Turner and Davis rode their pod through the atmosphere like a meteor, feeling the heat build up around their protective shell as they plunged toward the surface. The landing site was a rocky outcropping 5 kilometers from the colony, chosen because the terrain would provide natural cover for their approach. Sergeant Danny Walsh and Corporal Amy Foster touched down in a forest of native trees that grew like twisted sculptures in the alien soil. Their pod buried itself in the soft earth, leaving no trace of their arrival except for a small crater that could have been caused by any piece of space debris. The 6 teams spread out across the landscape, moving with the patience of hunters who understood that speed was less important than stealth. They had trained for years to operate in hostile territory, using terrain and darkness to remain invisible to enemies who possessed superior technology. Major Carter established his command post on a hilltop overlooking the colony, using passive sensors to monitor the alien positions without revealing his own location. The enemy had made their first mistake by following conventional military doctrine, establishing defensive perimeters that assumed their opponents would attack from predictable directions. Ghost Company did not follow conventional military doctrine. They were persistence hunters from a death world, and they were about to teach the galaxy why that combination was more dangerous than any weapon ever devised. The first Zephyrian sentry died without making a sound, his four-armed body crumpling to the ground as Sergeant Danny Walsh melted back into the shadows like smoke. The alien had been scanning the perimeter with thermal sensors, confident that his advanced equipment would detect any approaching threat. He never considered that a human predator might move so slowly that his body temperature matched the surrounding rocks. Corporal Amy Foster watched from her concealed position as Walsh dragged the body into a maintenance shed, leaving no trace of the kill except for a small bloodstain that could have come from any nocturnal animal. They had been moving for 3 hours, covering less than 2 kilometers, but every step brought them closer to the alien defensive line. The patience required for this kind of infiltration would have driven most species insane, but humans had evolved from persistence hunters who could track prey across continents. Time meant nothing when lives were at stake, and Ghost Company had all the time in the world to do this right. Lieutenant Chris Morgan crouched beside a communication relay station, his portable computer interface glowing softly in the darkness. The alien encryption system was elegant in its mathematical precision, but elegance was a weakness when facing an opponent who thought in chaos patterns. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he inserted a virus designed to spread through the enemy network like wildfire. The virus was a masterpiece of human programming, written in code that followed no logical progression. It adapted and evolved as it moved through the alien systems, learning their defensive protocols and turning them against themselves. Within minutes, Morgan had access to patrol schedules, weapon placements, and communication frequencies. Corporal Alex Turner and Private Nicole Davis approached the eastern perimeter, where a team of Grimlock warriors maintained watch over the mining equipment. The massive aliens stood 3 meters tall and weighed as much as small vehicles, their natural armor plating thick enough to stop conventional weapons. But armor had gaps, and humans had spent millennia learning exactly where to strike. Davis moved like a shadow through the industrial machinery, using the noise of the crystal extractors to mask her approach. Her combat knife was a simple tool compared to alien energy weapons, but it had been forged from materials that could cut through anything the galaxy had to offer. More importantly, it was wielded by a soldier who understood anatomy better than any alien doctor. The Grimlock never saw her coming. One moment he was scanning the darkness with infrared sensors. The next moment Davis was behind him with her blade finding the gap between armor plates that protected his spinal cord. The massive warrior collapsed like a felled tree, his weapon clattering harmlessly to the ground. Turner emerged from his hiding place to help drag the body into the shadows, but they both froze as voices echoed from the nearby communication post. A Nexari patrol leader was calling for a status report from the dead sentry, his reptilian voice carrying concern that had not been there an hour ago. The aliens were beginning to notice that something was wrong. Radio checks that should have been answered promptly were met with silence, and guards who should have reported in were nowhere to be found. Commander Zephi studied the tactical display in his command center, his cold eyes noting the gaps that were appearing in his defensive perimeter. Major Ryan Carter monitored the situation from his hilltop observation post, watching through passive sensors as confusion began to spread through the alien ranks. The enemy commander was good, better than most humans would have been in the same situation, but he was thinking like a civilized being who followed the established rules of warfare. Ghost Company did not follow established rules. They were apex predators from a world that had taught them to turn every disadvantage into a weapon, every obstacle into an opportunity. The aliens had superior numbers and better equipment, but they had never faced an enemy that hunted like humans hunted. Sergeant Kelly Brooks approached the main energy barrier that protected the colony's central complex, her satchel of shaped charges designed specifically for this moment. Human engineers had studied captured alien technology for months, learning how their defensive systems functioned, and more importantly, how they could be made to malfunction. The barrier operated on harmonic resonance frequencies that created an impenetrable wall of energy. But resonance could be disrupted if you knew the right frequency patterns, and Brooks carried explosives tuned to create exactly the right kind of chaos. She placed her charges with the precision of a surgeon, each one calculated to cause maximum disruption to the alien power grid. The first explosion came at exactly 0347 local time, a brilliant flash of light that sent shockwaves through the energy barrier. The aliens had designed their defenses to withstand direct assault by heavy weapons, but they had never considered an attack that worked from the inside out. The harmonic frequencies began to fluctuate wildly as feedback loops cascaded through the power system. HFY roared orders at his subordinates as warning lights flashed throughout the command center. The main defensive barrier was failing, but more importantly, his carefully planned defensive positions were being compromised by an enemy that seemed to strike from everywhere at once. This was not how civilized warfare was supposed to function. The Nexari commander activated his emergency protocols, ordering all outlying units to fall back to the central compound where they could establish interlocking fields of fire. It was a logical decision based on sound military doctrine, but logic was another weakness when facing an opponent who specialized in turning strength into vulnerability. Ghost Company had been waiting for exactly this moment. As the alien forces consolidated their positions, they created the target-rich environment that human special operations doctrine was designed to exploit. 6 teams of operators began their final approach, moving through terrain that the aliens had abandoned in their rush to establish defensive positions. Walsh and Foster found themselves behind enemy lines as confused alien soldiers hurried past their hiding places. The Mercenaries were professional fighters with years of experience, but they had never encountered an enemy that could become invisible in plain sight. Human camouflage techniques had been perfected through millions of years of hunting animals with better senses than any alien species. The second wave of explosions began as Brooks detonated her remaining charges in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Each blast was timed to cause maximum psychological impact while disrupting alien communication networks. The explosions came from impossible directions, making it seem like the humans could strike anywhere at any time. Turner and Davis used the chaos to infiltrate the main compound, their movements coordinated by encrypted signals that no alien technology could intercept. They moved like ghosts through the industrial complex, leaving behind a trail of disabled equipment and eliminated sentries. Every step brought them closer to the holding facilities, where 15,000 civilians waited for rescue. The aliens began to realize that they were not fighting a conventional military force, but something far more dangerous. These humans moved like predators from a nightmare, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation was possible. Fear began to spread through the mercenary ranks as professional soldiers found themselves hunted by an enemy they could neither see nor predict. The assault on the main compound began when Lieutenant Chris Morgan turned the aliens' own security systems against them. His virus had spread through their network like a digital plague, giving him control over automated turrets, environmental systems, and communication arrays. With a few keystrokes, he transformed the alien stronghold into a death trap designed by their own technology. Automated defense turrets that had been programmed to protect alien positions suddenly swiveled toward Nexari command posts, their targeting systems convinced that the reptilian officers were enemy infiltrators. Energy beams lanced through the darkness as the machines faithfully executed their new programming, forcing the aliens to take cover from their own defensive weapons. Corporal Amy Foster found herself face-to-face with a Grimlock heavy weapons specialist in the narrow corridors of the processing facility. The massive alien stood twice her height and outweighed her by 300 kilograms, his natural armor plating scarred by years of combat. His weapon could have vaporized a small building, but in close quarters it became a liability rather than an advantage. Foster moved like water around the alien's clumsy attacks, her human agility allowing her to stay inside his reach where the massive weapon could not be brought to bear. She had studied Grimlock anatomy during her training, learning that their impressive armor had weak points at the joints where flexibility required thinner protection. Her combat knife found the gap between shoulder plates that no alien engineer had thought to reinforce. The Grimlock warrior's roar of pain echoed through the facility as Foster twisted the blade, severing neural pathways that controlled his weapon arm. The massive alien collapsed as his nervous system shut down, his weapon clattering uselessly across the metal floor. Meanwhile, Sergeant Danny Walsh materialized in a command bunker that should have been impossible to infiltrate. The Nexari officers inside were studying tactical displays when Death arrived wearing human form, moving with the silent efficiency of an apex predator. 3 aliens died before the others even realized they were under attack. The surviving Nexari pressed themselves against the walls, their reptilian eyes wide with terror as they tried to understand how a human soldier had appeared in their most secure facility. Walsh did not waste time with explanations or threats. He simply eliminated the remaining threats and moved on to his next objective, leaving behind only silence and the smell of burned flesh. Commander HFY received increasingly frantic reports from his scattered forces, each message painting a picture of impossible events that defied military logic. Humans were appearing in locations that surveillance systems showed as empty, striking from directions that should have been covered by multiple layers of security. The Nexari commander's logical mind struggled to process information that seemed to contradict the laws of physics. His troops were reporting attacks by phantom soldiers who moved through walls and struck from impossible angles, but such things were clearly impossible. There had to be a rational explanation for what was happening. Major Ryan Carter coordinated the final assault from his observation post, his encrypted neural link allowing him to monitor all 6 teams simultaneously. The aliens had responded to his attacks exactly as human psychological warfare doctrine had predicted, consolidating their forces in defensive positions that made them easier targets rather than harder ones. The truth that the aliens could not accept was simpler than they imagined. Humans were not supernatural beings with magical powers. They were simply the product of evolutionary pressures that had taught them to overcome obstacles through adaptability, persistence, and creative problem-solving. What seemed impossible to alien minds was merely another tactical challenge to soldiers from Earth. Corporal Alex Turner led the assault on the primary holding facility where the colonists were imprisoned. The building was heavily fortified with energy barriers and automated defenses, but human engineers had identified weaknesses in the structural design that alien architects had never considered. The facility had been built to keep people in, not to keep determined rescuers out. Turner and Private Nicole Davis approached through maintenance tunnels that did not appear on any alien schematic. The tunnels had been carved by mining equipment during the colony's construction, creating a network of passages that honeycombed the underground areas. The aliens had secured the obvious entrances but never considered that humans might create their own. The rescue operation unfolded with surgical precision as Ghost Company teams struck simultaneously at multiple points throughout the compound. Each team knew their objectives and had trained extensively for exactly this type of operation. But more importantly, they possessed the flexibility to adapt when circumstances changed. Davis found herself in a storage area filled with captured mining equipment when a Grimlock patrol stumbled into her hiding place. Instead of retreating or calling for backup, she improvised a solution using the heavy machinery around her. The mining laser that had been designed to cut through solid rock proved equally effective against alien armor plating. Sergeant Kelly, Brooks reached the main power generator that supplied energy to the holding facility's security systems. Her remaining explosives were carefully placed to cause cascading failures throughout the electrical grid, but she timed the detonation to occur during the rescue operation when maximum chaos would provide cover for the escaping civilians. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the compound as backup power systems failed and emergency lighting flickered on throughout the facility. In the confusion that followed, human operators moved like ghosts through the darkened corridors, eliminating guards and freeing prisoners with methodical efficiency. Lisa Rodriguez found herself face-to-face with Major Carter as Ghost Company operators cut through the locks that had held her captive. The security chief had survived 3 days of alien captivity by maintaining hope that somehow rescue would come, but she had never imagined that help would arrive in the form of soldiers who fought like demons from human mythology. The evacuation of civilians proceeded, under the protection of Ghost Company operators who had transformed the alien stronghold into a killing field. Every corridor became a trap, every room a potential ambush site where human soldiers could appear without warning, to eliminate threats before vanishing back into the shadows. Commander HFY made his final mistake when he attempted to use human civilians as shields during a desperate last stand in the command center. The Nexari commander assumed that humans would prioritize civilian safety over military objectives, following the civilized rules of warfare that governed most galactic conflicts. He was partially correct in his assumption, but he underestimated human tactical flexibility and the lengths to which soldiers from Earth would go to protect innocent lives. What followed was a rescue operation that saved every hostage while eliminating every threat, executed with timing and coordination that seemed impossible to alien observers. The battle for New Haven ended not with dramatic speeches or climactic explosions, but with the quiet professionalism of soldiers completing their mission. The last alien stronghold fell when Brooks used captured mining equipment to collapse the command bunker, forcing surrender through superior tactics rather than superior firepower. The silence that followed the collapse of the alien command bunker was broken only by the distant hum of mining equipment and the quiet voices of rescued colonists being led to safety. Major Ryan Carter stood in the ruins of what had been Commander Zephi's stronghold, watching as his operators completed their final security sweeps with the same methodical precision they had shown throughout the operation. Commander Zephi himself sat, propped against a piece of twisted metal, his reptilian features marked by burns and cuts that would heal but leave permanent scars. The Nexari officer's eyes held something that Carter had seen before in defeated enemies, a mixture of disbelief and newfound respect for an opponent who had proven far more dangerous than anticipated. Carter approached the alien commander without weapons drawn, his posture relaxed but alert. The human officer was smaller than the reptilian warrior, lacking natural armor or enhanced strength, yet Zephi found himself instinctively leaning back as if facing a predator that might strike without warning. There was something in the human's calm demeanor that spoke of depths the Nexari mind struggled to comprehend. The conversation that followed was brief and conducted in the universal trade language that served as common ground between species. Carter did not gloat over his victory or make threats against future alien operations. Instead, he simply stated facts with the detached professionalism of a soldier, completing an unpleasant but necessary task. The alien forces had been neutralized with minimal casualties on both sides. Their ships were disabled but repairable, their crews detained but unharmed. The quantum crystal deposits would remain under human control, and the civilian population was safe. Most importantly, detailed records of the engagement would be transmitted throughout the Galactic Communication Network ZEF. I listened to these words with growing understanding of what had truly occurred on New Haven. This had not been a simple rescue operation, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration designed to send a message that would echo across every mercenary organization in known space. The humans had not just defeated his forces, but had done so in a way that would make others think twice before targeting human colonies. Lieutenant Chris Morgan supervised the transfer of combat, footage, and tactical analysis to the galactic data networks, ensuring that every detail of Ghost Company's performance would be available for study by alien military analysts. The recordings showed humans who moved like shadows, struck like lightning, and adapted to changing circumstances with inflexibility that seemed almost supernatural. The psychological impact of these transmissions would prove more valuable than any weapon system. Professional soldiers throughout the galaxy would watch human operators eliminate superior alien forces through tactics that defied conventional military doctrine. Equipment manufacturers would study human weapons and wonder how such primitive technology had achieved such devastating results. Sergeant Kelly Brooks coordinated the medical treatment of wounded aliens with the same efficiency she had shown while placing explosives. Ghost Company medics worked alongside colonial medical staff to treat Nexari, Zephyrian, and Grimlock casualties without regard for species or allegiance. This puzzled the alien prisoners, who had expected execution or imprisonment rather than professional medical care. The aliens did not understand that humans could compartmentalize violence and compassion with equal skill, switching from lethal efficiency to humanitarian assistance as the situation demanded. This psychological flexibility was another product of their Deathworld evolution, allowing them to form alliances and show mercy while remaining ready to kill without hesitation when necessary. Corporal Alex Turner helped coordinate the evacuation of surviving mercenaries to their disabled ships under human escort. The alien soldiers moved like defeated troops anywhere in the galaxy, their professional pride wounded but their spirits not completely broken. They had fought well against impossible odds and lived to tell about it, which was more than many could claim. The departure of the alien fleet occurred under conditions that reinforced the message Ghost Company intended to send. The mercenaries were allowed to repair their ships and leave the system, but they carried with them the knowledge that human space was now defended by soldiers who fought like nightmares made real. 3 weeks later, The effects of the New Haven incident began to manifest throughout the mercenary community. Contract prices for operations against human targets increased by 400% as companies factored in the newly understood risks of engaging Terran Special Operations Forces. Several major organizations simply refused such contracts entirely, preferring easier targets that did not involve Deathworld predators. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt communication center, watching as normal life returned to New Haven Colony. Children played in the central plaza while their parents worked to repair the damage caused by the alien occupation. The quantum crystal mines were operating at full capacity again, their valuable output now protected by defensive systems that incorporated lessons learned during the recent Battle. Admiral Henry Clark received reports from across human space indicating that colonial raids had dropped to their lowest levels in decades. The mere possibility of encountering Ghost Company had become a deterrent more effective than any defensive fleet or orbital weapon platform. The reputation of human special forces was spreading faster than their ships could travel. The story of New Haven became legend among the trading posts and military bases that dotted the galactic frontier. Details were embellished with each telling. Capabilities were exaggerated beyond recognition, and human soldiers achieved an almost mythical status among alien military personnel who had never encountered them directly. But the truth behind the legend was both simpler and more complex than the story suggested. Humans were not supernatural warriors or unstoppable killing machines blessed with magical powers. They were simply the product of a world that had demanded excellence in the art of survival, refined through millions of years of evolutionary pressure into a science of warfare that few species could understand. Ghost Company continued its missions throughout human space, protecting colonial interests with the quiet professionalism that had made them famous. Major Carter and his operators knew that their greatest weapon was not their training or equipment, but the galaxy's growing belief that humans were something to be feared rather than conquered. 6 months after the incident, a young Zephyrian merchant asked his captain why humans inspired such terror when they appeared physically inferior to most galactic species. The captain's response captured the essence of humanity's growing reputation among the stars. Humans did not fight like civilized beings who followed established rules of engagement. They fought like survivors from a death world who had turned survival into an art form. The final image was of Earth itself, blue and beautiful in the endless void, orbited by defense platforms that rarely needed to fire their weapons. The galaxy had learned through painful experience that some worlds produced more than resources or trade goods. Some worlds produced legends that kept the darkness at bay through reputation alone.